Nora stood in her small bedroom that stormy night, listening to thunder shake the whole apartment as rain slapped the windows like angry hands. She was only 13, but the fear she felt made her heart race like someone much older. Carol, her stepmother, appeared at the doorway with her face twisted in rage and something clutched in her hand. "Get up, Nora," she hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're about to learn the truth tonight." Nora's stomach tightened. She whispered, "Carol, what did I do now?" But Carol only smiled coldly, a smile that meant trouble. Before that night, Nora had always believed life could be normal if she tried hard enough. When she had moved in with her father Mark 3 years earlier, she whispered to herself, maybe this time things will be better. Mark worked construction, leaving home before sunrise and returning after dark, exhausted. Carol worked downtown managing a store, usually pretending to be warm only when Mark was around. Carol's daughters, Anna and Lily, were 2 years younger, always giggling together while avoiding Nora. The tiny apartment echoed with secrets, and Nora learned early that her safest plan was to stay quiet. Nora's room was barely big enough for her thin bed and a used desk, but she made it feel like home. She taped her school awards on the walls and stacked library books everywhere. Every morning she woke before everyone else to make breakfast. "Eggs for Dad, French toast for the twins, and toast for Carol," she whispered as she cooked. For herself, she ate whatever remained. School, though, everything changed. "Good job, Nora," teachers often said as she earned perfect grades. The library became her escape, especially when Mrs. Parker, the librarian, smiled warmly and offered snacks. But at home, Carol's cruelty grew sharper each day. When Mark wasn't there, her mask dropped quickly. "Don't touch anything," Carol would snap. "You're lucky we let you stay here." At dinner, Nora tried sharing her achievements, but Carol shut her down. "Mark, we need to talk about bills," she'd interrupt coldly. The small hurts added up. Movie nights she wasn't allowed to join, restaurant dinners where she was too sick to come, and school shopping trips that ended with her receiving thrift store leftovers. Nora whispered to herself at night, "Just hold on. One day things will change." Mrs. Parker became the one adult who saw Nora clearly. The gentle librarian would say, "You look tired today, dear. Want a granola bar?" Nora always nodded gratefully. Mrs. Parker noticed how Nora jumped at sudden sounds, how she chose seats near doors, how she clutched books like shields. But autumn brought a feeling Nora couldn't explain, a pressure like a storm forming inside the apartment. Carol began mentioning Nora's mother cruelly, saying things like, "Some women shouldn't be mothers." Nora bit her tongue every time. She whispered to herself, "Don't react. Don't give them anything to use against you." The breaking point began with something good, which made it hurt even more. Nora had won first place in the district science fair with a project about stress and the teenage brain. $500, she whispered in disbelief, staring at the check. She hid it inside a library book, afraid Carol would twist it into something ugly. 2 days later, Mark left for Toledo for a long construction project. "Be good girls," he said cheerfully, hugging everyone before driving away. Nora felt a small hope. "Maybe Carol will ignore me while he's gone," she whispered. But she was wrong. The next afternoon, Nora returned from school to find Carol standing in her room, holding a pearl bracelet Nora had never touched. "Look what I found in your bag," Carol said loudly. Behind her, Anna smirked while Lily stared at the floor. Nora shook her head. "Carol, I didn't take that. I swear, I've never even seen it up close." But Carol's voice rose dramatically, echoing down the hall. "Thief! You stole from me." Neighbors peeked out as Carol called her sister, her friends, anyone who would listen. Each retelling made Nora sound worse. Nora whispered, "This is a setup." That night, Carol searched Nora's room while Nora sat at the kitchen table under strict orders not to move. Every few minutes Carol shouted, "Found another thing you stole," then waved items Nora had never seen. Anna's missing $20, Lily's necklace, a lipstick Nora didn't recognize. The girls gasped theatrically, enjoying the drama. Nora whispered shaky protests, but Carol cut her off. "Save it for the police," she snapped. The next day at school, Nora walked through the halls like a ghost. Mr. Wilson noticed her trembling hands and asked softly, "Nora, is something wrong?" She almost told him. Dark clouds gathered as Nora walked home that afternoon, matching the heaviness in her chest. But nothing prepared her for the sight waiting at the apartment door. Her suitcase, the same blue one she'd arrived with, sat on the steps. Wind whipped across the courtyard as Carol swung the door open dramatically. "There she is. The thief returns," she shouted. Anna held her phone, recording everything. Lily wiped fake tears. Nora swallowed and whispered, "Please call Dad. He'll know I'd never do this." Carol shoved her hard toward the steps. "Get out, Nora. You're nothing but trouble." Lightning flashed behind her. Carol's final attack came like a knife to the heart. Your mother didn't die in a car accident, she said coldly. She left you because she couldn't stand you. Nora froze, rain beginning to fall like the sky itself was crying. No, that's not true, she whispered, but Carol smirked. Your father lied to protect your feelings. But you should know, you're unlovable. With that she slammed the door. Nora heard the lock click, then the deadbolt, then the chain. 3 locks shutting her out of the only home she had. She stood in the rain trembling, her suitcase soaking. Nora stood in the pouring rain. Her hair plastered to her face as thunder boomed overhead. Through the window, she could see Anna and Lily high-fiving each other while Carol poured herself a glass of wine, smiling like she'd won a prize. Nora lifted her suitcase, shocked by its weight. Under the small overhang she opened it and stared in disbelief. Carol had packed only 2 thin summer outfits, no jacket, no warm clothes, no money, nothing useful. The worst part was the school photos of Nora, each one scratched across the face. Nora whispered, "She wants me erased." Desperate, Nora knocked on Mrs. Rogers' door. "Please, it's me," she cried. "I have nowhere to go." But the apartment stayed silent. Nora didn't know Carol had already told neighbors she was a thief. With shaking hands, Nora dragged her suitcase through the rain to the corner store. The bell chimed as she entered, water pooling beneath her feet. Mr. Lee looked up, startled. "Nora, what happened?" he asked softly. But when she begged, "Can I stay here until the rain stops?" he hesitated. "Your stepmother was here earlier," he whispered. "She warned me you're dangerous." Nora's heart cracked. Still, Mr. Lee quietly handed her $1 in quarters and a small bag of chips. "I'm sorry, Nora," he murmured, eyes full of guilt. She stepped back into the storm and used the payphone near the flickering streetlight. She tried calling the library, hoping Mrs. Parker would answer, but it was closed. She dialed the police next. "I'm 13. My stepmother kicked me out," she told the officer. But the response was cold. "Unless you're in physical danger, we can't help," the voice said. Nora stared at the rain and whispered, "How is this not danger?" With nowhere left to go, Nora dragged herself to the bus stop on Maple Street, a small shelter with 3 walls and a plastic bench. She curled up, trying to stay warm as the wind howled around her. Her clothes clung to her skin, and her teeth chattered uncontrollably. She whispered into her knees, "Dad, please come home." Hours later, an older woman pushing a shopping cart approached the stop. She sat down silently beside Nora, her eyes kind. "Storm's a rough one," the woman murmured. Nora nodded, too tired to speak. The woman smiled gently. "Name's Grace, sweetheart." Grace unwrapped a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and broke it in 2. "Eat," she said softly. "You look frozen." Nora hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you." They ate together as lightning flashed. After a while Grace asked, "Why were you out here alone?" Nora's voice shook. "My stepmother kicked me out. She said terrible things." Grace sighed deeply. "Baby, some people break others, 'cause they're broken themselves." She taught Nora survival tips, where shelters were, which places to avoid, how to stay safe. When a police car slowed nearby, Grace gently squeezed Nora's hand. "Don't worry. We're invisible to them." They stayed awake through the entire storm. Grace dozed sometimes, whispering a name, "Catherine," as though calling out to someone she'd lost. Nora listened to the thunder, trying not to cry too loudly. At dawn, the rain stopped, leaving the streets washed clean but freezing cold. Grace stood and adjusted her layers of coats. "Worst nights can lead to better mornings," she said softly. "You're smart. I see it in your eyes. Don't let them win." Nora felt tears rise as she whispered, "I won't forget you." Grace smiled sadly and pushed her cart away. Nora never saw her again. Nora staggered into the gas station bathroom, shivering violently. The mirror showed a girl who looked nothing like herself. Hair tangled, clothes muddy, eyes swollen from crying. "You can fix this," she whispered. She washed her face with rough paper towels, changed into one of the summer outfits from her suitcase, and used soap to brush her teeth. Then she walked 40 minutes to school, leaving her suitcase hidden behind a dumpster. When she stepped inside the warm building, she felt her body relax slightly. She went straight to the gym showers, letting the hot water restore a tiny piece of hope. School felt impossible, yet she forced herself through the day. In algebra she stared at equations, her mind blank. In English she read Shakespeare but couldn't focus. In history she listened to lessons about survival, wondering if she'd make it through the week. At lunch Mrs. Washington noticed her pale face and whispered, "You look hungry, honey." She loaded Nora's tray with extra food, rolls, fruit cups, milk. Nora blinked back tears. "Thank you," she said softly. She saved half the food, wrapping it in napkins. As she left the cafeteria, she whispered, "I'm not letting this break me." After school, Nora retrieved her suitcase and began the long walk to Safe Harbor, the youth shelter Grace had mentioned. 8 miles in thin clothes felt impossible. Her shoes rubbed blisters into her feet, and her arms ached from carrying the heavy suitcase after the wheel broke completely. Cars passed without stopping. A group of older boys shouted things that made her walk faster. When she finally reached the yellow building with a lighthouse painted on the sign, she nearly collapsed. "I can help you," a young woman said, rushing forward. "My name is Joy. Come inside, sweetheart." Inside the shelter, Joy handed Nora water and a granola bar before asking anything. "Tell me what happened when you're ready," she said gently. Nora explained everything, her voice trembling. Joy's eyes filled with anger on her behalf. "You didn't deserve any of that," she whispered. Joy completed the intake paperwork and said, "You can stay 30 days while we sort things out." Nora was placed in a room with 3 other girls, Maria, Keisha, and Tanya. They each had their own tragedies. As Nora lay on the thin mattress that night, she whispered, "I will not let them win." Life at the shelter came with strict rules. Lights out at 10, wake up at 6, chores before breakfast, mandatory school attendance. But to Nora, these rules felt like safety, something predictable after months of walking on eggshells. Keisha noticed Nora wearing the same thin outfit again, and quietly handed her a lavender-scented sweater. "It's old but warm," she whispered. Nora hugged it gratefully. At school the next day, whispers followed her. "Is she homeless?" a boy muttered. Nora kept her head down. But in science class, Mr. Wilson stopped her gently. "Nora, stay after. We need to talk." When the room emptied, Mr. Wilson sat on the edge of his desk watching her carefully. "Nora, something is seriously wrong," he said softly. "You don't look safe." Nora tried to smile, but it cracked instantly. "I'm fine," she whispered. But he shook his head. "No, you're not. And you don't have to pretend here." That was all it took. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered the truth. Being kicked out, the storm, the lies. Mr. Wilson listened without interrupting. Then he stood and said firmly, "We're calling the principal and the school social worker. You're not alone now." Within an hour, Nora sat in a conference room with 3 adults who spoke gently but with urgency. They explained that they were required to call Child Protective Services. "Please don't," Nora begged. "I just need to reach my dad. He's in Toledo." Ms. Martinez from CPS arrived later that afternoon, a small woman with calm eyes. "Nora, I'm here to help," she said softly. She asked questions, took notes, and photographed Nora's belongings. "We will find your father," she promised. And she did. That same evening she located Mark through his job records and left urgent messages. Mark received the call while operating a crane. His coworker later told Nora he almost jumped off the machine in panic, climbing down so fast they feared he would fall. He sped back to Cleveland, calling CPS every 10 minutes for updates. When he finally reached the office and saw Nora, he broke. "My baby," he cried, falling to his knees and pulling her into his arms. Nora had never seen him cry before. "I'm so sorry," he said over and over. "I should have known. I should have protected you." Nora whispered back, "Dad, you're here now. That's enough." The next morning, CPS required a confrontation meeting with all parties present. Carol arrived dressed as if she were going to a courtroom. Hair perfect, notebook in hand. "Nora has been unstable for months," she began confidently. "She steals, lies, influences my daughters negatively." But Ms. Martinez separated the twins for questioning. Without Carol's control, Anna broke within minutes, sobbing, "Mom made us lie. She planted the bracelet." Lily cried too, admitting everything. Carol slammed her notebook shut and shouted, "They're confused." But the truth was already spilled across the room, undeniable and devastating. What Nora learned next was even worse. The pearl bracelet Carol claimed Nora stole had actually been sold weeks earlier to cover Carol's gambling debts. She had panicked when Mark mentioned wanting to see her wear it to an upcoming event. So she created a villain, Nora. Phone logs showed Carol laughing with her sister the night she kicked Nora out. Text messages revealed she'd planned the setup for weeks. Mark filed for divorce that same day. "I'm done," he said coldly. "You put my daughter in danger." Carol tried to argue, but even her lawyer looked defeated. While CPS completed their investigation, Nora was placed in foster care. She was terrified at first, but the Johnsons, her foster family, were nothing like she imagined. Mrs. Johnson, a retired teacher, welcomed her with warm eyes. "You're safe here," she said. Mr. Johnson, a former Marine, promised, "No one will hurt you again." They gave Nora her own room, soft blankets, and quiet evenings. Mrs. Johnson taught her to knit during their nightly talks. "It helps your mind settle," she said. Mr. Johnson taught her self-defense. Knowledge is protection, he said. Nora slowly felt herself breathing again. The court hearings were emotionally heavy. Nora had to retell the story repeatedly, each detail reopening wounds. Carol sat across the room glaring like Nora was the villain. Her lawyer tried to bring up Nora's mother, saying, "This child has a history of women abandoning her." Nora flinched, but the judge shut it down immediately. "Irrelevant and cruel," he said. In the end, the truth was overwhelming. Mark received full custody. Carol got nothing. No assets, no visitation, no sympathy from the court. She received probation for endangerment and filing false reports. Nora whispered, "It's finally over." When Nora returned home with Mark, everything felt strange. The apartment was quiet, almost too quiet. Carol and the twins' belongings were gone, leaving empty spaces that reminded Nora of missing teeth. Mark tried to make Nora comfortable. New furniture, a new bedspread, soft lights. But Nora still woke up overwhelmed some nights. Mark apologized daily. "I wanted so badly to give you a mother. I didn't see what she was doing," he admitted. Nora nodded softly. "We'll learn together," she said. Slowly they built new routines, cooking together, talking more, taking walks on weekends, rebuilding trust inch by inch. 3 weeks later, Mark finally told Nora the truth about her mother. They sat at the kitchen table in silence before he spoke. "Your mom didn't die," he said gently. "She left when you were 3. Nora stared at him, stunned. He continued, "I wasn't a good husband back then. Drinking, anger, she couldn't stay. She gave up her rights completely." Nora didn't cry, she just breathed slowly, understanding suddenly why certain memories felt blurry. "You lied to protect me," she whispered. Mark nodded with tears in his eyes. "I wanted you to feel loved, even if it wasn't perfect." Therapy became part of Nora and Mark's routine. Their therapist, Dr. Chen, spoke softly and encouraged them to talk honestly. "Nora," she said gently, "you need to express what you felt, not just what happened." Nora learned to voice the fear, the confusion, the loneliness that had lived inside her for years. Mark learned to listen without rushing to fix things. At the end of each session, Nora felt lighter, as if she was slowly removing stones from her chest. "We're getting better," Mark would say during their drives home. And for the first time, Nora truly believed him. School became a different experience for Nora after the truth came out. Some students treated her like a fragile survivor. Others admired her strength. But Nora didn't care about labels. She focused on rebuilding herself. Mr. Wilson became her greatest supporter. "You're gifted, Nora," he said. "Let's prepare you for advanced science classes." He stayed after school to tutor her, teaching her things far beyond the textbook. Nora threw herself into her work, whispering late at night, "Education is my way out." Each A she earned felt like reclaiming a piece of her power from the storm that once broke her. Mrs. Parker, the librarian, cried softly when Nora told her everything. "Oh, my dear girl," she whispered, pulling Nora into a warm hug. She returned the hidden science fair check, still untouched, and helped her open a bank account. "This is your future," she told her gently. Nora saved every dollar she could. Mark matched each deposit with whatever he earned in overtime. "One day," he said proudly, "you'll go to college and become the doctor you dream of." Nora smiled with determination. "I will," she whispered. For once, she wasn't saying it out of desperation. She believed it. 6 months later, Nora received an email from Anna. It was long and full of apologies. "I was scared of Mom," she wrote. "I knew it was wrong. I wish I'd spoken up sooner." Nora read it several times. Finally, she wrote back, "I forgive you. Not for you, but for me." Forgiveness lifted a weight she didn't know she still carried. Lily never reached out. Nora heard through school gossip that Lily told people Nora manipulated everyone. It hurt, but Nora understood. "Some people cling to lies," she whispered to herself, "because the truth is too heavy for them." High school began, and Nora transformed herself through hard work. She joined Honor Society, volunteered at the hospital, and excelled in every science class. "You're going places," teachers often said. Nora kept moving forward, building a future where she controlled the narrative. She didn't forget the storm. She used it as motivation. She whispered to herself before tests, "Prove Carol wrong." By senior year, Nora stood at the top of her class. When college acceptance letters arrived, she cried into her hands. "Full scholarship," she whispered, reading the letter from Ohio State. Mark lifted her in a tearful embrace. Graduation day brought sunshine and applause. Nora delivered the valedictorian speech with calm confidence. She spoke about resilience, about storms shaping diamonds, and though she never mentioned her story directly, every word came from her heart. After the ceremony, Mark and his new wife Sandra hugged her tightly. Sandra whispered, "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." But across the parking lot, Nora suddenly saw Carol. Older, thinner, worn down by her own choices. She whispered Nora's name softly, "Nora," before security approached. Nora turned away and walked toward her family, leaving Carol standing alone, facing a life she created. College became a fresh start. Nora made new friends, studied harder than ever, and learned to trust people slowly. Her roommate, Jen, became her first real close friend. One night Nora shared her story, and Jen squeezed her hand. "You're incredible," she said softly. Most people would have given up. Medical school acceptance came later, delivered while she was volunteering at the hospital. When Mark and Sandra heard the news, Mark cried openly. "You did it, baby," he said. Nora whispered, "We did it." She knew Grace, Mrs. Parker, the Johnsons, and Mr. Wilson all lived in that victory. During residency, Nora chose adolescent medicine. Her supervisor asked, "Why teenagers? They're the hardest." Nora smiled gently. "Because one person believing in you at that age can change everything." Years passed, and Nora became head of the adolescent medicine unit at Cleveland Clinic. She volunteered at Safe Harbor and helped build programs for teens who'd been pushed out or abandoned. Joy became the shelter's director, proudly placing a framed picture of Nora's medical graduation on her desk. "Your story gives kids hope," Joy said. Nora smiled softly. "Hope kept me alive. I'm just passing it on." Nora's life grew full and meaningful. The Johnsons visited monthly, still calling her one of their kids. Mrs. Johnson knitted scarves for Nora's patients, while Mr. Johnson taught trade skills to teens aging out of foster care. Mrs. Parker had passed away, but her daughter delivered a box filled with every article she'd saved about Nora's achievements. Mark and Sandra lived peacefully in the suburbs, proud of the woman Nora became. Anna, now a social worker, often met Nora for coffee, grateful for forgiveness. But Carol faded into the background, living alone, still blaming others for the life she destroyed. One afternoon, Nora stood by the hospital window overlooking Cleveland's east side, the same streets where she'd once been abandoned in a rainstorm. She thought of Grace's half sandwich, Mrs. Parker's kindness, Mr. Wilson's belief, and the Johnsons' gentle guidance. She remembered the frightened 13-year-old girl standing in the storm, believing her life was over. Nora whispered softly, "It was never the end. It was the beginning." Later that day, she told her teen patients, "Your storm doesn't define you. Your survival does." And as she walked through the clinic halls, she carried one truth with her. Dawn always comes.